What is going on, you guys? It's your boy, the Unholy Ghost here, and we're back with episode 37 of the video game therapy series. I'll get right into it today. I have a question to get me started. It's not even a question really, it's just a thought, like most of these things are. There's a lot of emphasis, especially in, I use the term workplace culture, but I mean just maybe career talk type stuff, about the value or emphasis of specialization over being a generalist. And I'll say off the bat that the arguments for either side of these are, you can make a quite a strong argument on both sides, to be fair. And really the main thing I'm talking about is here, for your career, is it better to, and we're just going to talk about we're not going to go into the philosophy of a career. We're going to speak very shallow about careers in and of themselves, as if there's a very, very strict methodology with it. But the overall kind of prompt being, is it better to specialize in something super, super niche, as a form of, protecting yourself, because you are difficult to replace, because your knowledge is very specific and or not well known, like you're the master of that one thing? Or is it better to generalize and be versatile and, be good enough in a lot of different areas? And I'll say right off the bat my opinion on this, which again, I really think there's a valid argument to be made on both sides of this, but I am on the generalist side for a couple reasons, which I'll get into. But first, just to kind of provide more context on why is it that is a claim to be made, that, or why is it that the specialization claim has merit? One being that there's, if you're not, highly specialized in something, if you're not overly competent in a very particular field, you're a lot more easily replaceable, in the sense that you could, it'd be much easier to just fire you or do whatever and find somebody else. Like if you left, it wouldn't be that difficult. So I get that having a very, very, specific set of knowledge or skills that is useful to a business or some entity in which you can get paid is a valid strategy for keeping a career. But and there are more arguments which I think I'll probably just stumble upon them as I get into the arguments as for why I am a proponent of being a generalist. But my main constraints with the over specialization, especially at like a younger age, where I guess philosophically, I don't think that people are meant to be to like lock themselves into a very, very specific niche, especially early on. Like, as like a 25-year-old, to make the decision to be the, okay, in 20 years I want to be the world's forefront expert on, the Egyptian snake's digestive system or something. And, that is a ridiculous, and maybe because there's some, generative capacity of that snake that could be applicable to like treat cancer or something. Regardless, nobody on the planet, I make the decision at 25 to pursue this, academic probably endeavor, but it would apply just as well to, be the whatever of something else. At 25, I decide that I'm going to invest my entire career and time in becoming the forefront expert on the Egyptian snake's digestive system. My first thing is, that's a pretty big decision and like investment to make. And I think people run into the midlife crisis when they, are told and are forced, really just not really forced, but they're told strongly and decide to give into the pressure to make a decision like that, they become, I am going to specialize in, you know, I don't know, cybersecurity of systems that use Microsoft Teams or something. And I'm like only ever going to do that. I'm only going to work, like very, very specific, even more specific than that even, but specialize enough to the point where, there's only, there's a known and finite number of things to study within a very particular field of something. But my first beef is that do you really think that it's even possible to maintain the, without maybe some level of like, autistic focus or brilliance, to be that focused on and motivated to do something like that, like one specific thing for that long. And even just anecdotally in my own pursuits, I'm never like super, super interested in one tiny little thing that am willing to throw away everything else and just study that one thing forever. Like even, in the time I've spent programming, I've done it in like 15 different languages, and I don't ever see myself being like this. I only ever do, front end JavaScript systems, or I only ever do, this niche Python data analytics, and I'll never do anything else. I only ever use this. Even just from a motivation and interest perspective, how can I ever like just box myself in like that? And I guess I'm just someone that is curious about other stuff, and I'm always just like willing to try stuff out and kind of learn new things. I don't know if that's necessarily something that people just grow out of, or it gets beaten out of them, in the sense that, our company uses Python. There's no point in you ever learning anything other than Python. So just do Python, forget everything else. If you're not spending your time learning more Python, then you're wasting time or whatever. But I think I would just so quickly just get, like unmotivated to do that. And I'd be like, I don't want to just do this for the rest of my life. This is boring. I'd want to, try other stuff. And some people don't have the luxury of doing that, but I would just think from a motivational perspective, there's a major flaw in over specializing, especially early on. Like, what is the rush to get into some super niche field? The other thing is if let's say that for any number of reasons your job becomes superfluous, and let's say that you're this, network security engineer that only works on Microsoft Teams systems or something. Let's just say that Microsoft blows up. I don't know. Like the whole, the company just no longer exists. If somebody, steals all their servers and blows all I don't even know what they would do, how they would even go about doing that. But let's just suppose, for example, the company no longer exists, the technology no longer exists, or if it does exist, isn't used. I assume there'd be some cracked versions, of Microsoft flying around or whatever. And this is a ridiculous hypothetical. Microsoft was probably the wrong software to use, but let's just say something like Salesforce or something else that could theoretically be replaced by something else. But you've spent all your time being an expert on one thing. So now you kind of have to just reskill, which sucks, and you could probably do, but wouldn't it have been easier to not like have dug yourself such a hole in the beginning? Because now you're basically starting like at the level of a high schooler, but I mean, you have 40 years of useless experience. So just to put that in perspective, suppose that it was that you're, the Egyptian snake's digestive specialist, and the snake is extinct now. And aside from you writing articles and being a historian about the snake and talking about the history behind the snake and its importance, it's gone. There's no more snakes. It's over. Like, you can't even, I mean, there's bones left, but like, even if you could come up with something, they're all dead. Like, so then now what? Like, you got to pick a different animal or a different species. And yeah, you're probably good at snakes in general. So you could like pivot to a different snake. But, wouldn't you rather have just started with being tried to have cast as wide of a net as possible, Like, I'm just an expert on all snakes, I know, or just reptiles, maybe. And then that way it's like, you have kind of more of a buffer, right? So I guess there's the motivation piece that it doesn't really make any sense to me. Like, how would somebody remain motivated to even just keep learning about something like that? And also, The last thing is like the translation of learning across different disciplines. So suppose that you are a reptile specialist. Let's just suppose that. And I'm not saying that learning more about different new reptiles or there's a process that you could probably come up with to understand a new species of reptile or something like that. And my argument is that that process that you've come up with to learn more about and get deeper into a subject and become more of an expert on that subject is less applicable to all, like, learning all subjects than you would if you had experience as a generalist. Let's say you were a network security engineer who is a car salesman and and also likes Greek history or something like that, and you just kind of have this really strange mix and this like kind of wider net of skills and abilities and knowledge. I would reason to believe that the learning, like the kind of meta learning approach in the sense of how you're learning the new things that you're learning, is much more applicable than if you'd stayed within that one field. Like, I guess mathematics would be a better example. If you just are only learning about new mathematical and how to apply new mathematical concepts, like your ability to maybe understand, I imagine you could pick up a chemistry concepts pretty quickly as well. But what about like in something in the social sciences that'd be totally foreign to you? You try to make it some math or chemical equation, and you're like, dude, it's a social science. It's kind of nebulous. It wouldn't apply as well. So I think even maybe drawing a line between the hard and soft sciences and being able to learn both of those is to me an asset that's worth more than what you would get out of over specializing. And especially the one issue, the problem that I see with a lot of the new technology is advancing very fast. I think we can all agree with that. But there's the demands in which different skills and things will be necessary in the future is not like a foregone conclusion. It is like, I think you'd be an idiot to declare that there is, everyone's going to need to be a programmer. It's like, I mean, it's just as likely that no one's going to need to be a programmer. Now, both of those I think are wrong. I think, there'll still be jobs that are, in some form or another programming jobs. But does everybody, no, not everyone needs to be a programmer. So I think sticking to these extremes, especially in understanding like something as complex as a job market is a ridiculous thing. So to specialize, especially like, what essentially becomes 20 or 30 or 40 years in advance before you become an expert on something, the likelihood of it being stupid or useless by the time, you are an expert is a lot greater than if you just decided not to over specialize much earlier. So, and I don't know. That's just, I really don't see the I mean, I do see the argument, but I don't really agree with the argument that like your best chance to have a lucrative career in something is to be the one and only, the Michael Jordan of Egyptian, whatever. I mean, just as valuable as Michael Jordan is like these role players, right? Draymond Green. Are you kidding me? That guy is like, and if you don't watch the NBA, this doesn't make any sense, but basically, yeah, Michael Jordan's a superstar and he can make, he's really, really good at these, whatever, like the Dirk Nowitzki's really good at that fadeaway shot or whatever. You can specialize a ton, but, just as valuable are these people that can do everything on the court. Now, granted, at the end of the day, they're all basketball players. So it's like, I am speaking about someone who they're very, very highly specialized in their own right, but to a certain extent, they're not like so. Like I'm sure Draymond Green isn't so uberly focused on being the best, shooter of all time because he'd rather just kind of have a holistic game. He works on a shot some, works on the passing, kind of works on everything simultaneously, and is valuable in that right. So I think, if nothing else, especially if you're on the side of being a specialist in terms of you think it's best to specialize, I really think there's a good balance, right? I think it's helpful to have these, almost this autistic Asperger's level focus on different things for some people should, that's in their best interest. But it's also, we need people that are very like broad generalist people. And I just find more interest in being a generalized, trained or knowledgeable person than being this super hyper focused, knowing only one thing about one thing person that, you know, because even just being an interesting person, if you don't know anything about anything and all you know is about Egyptian stomachs or Egyptian snake stomachs, how interesting of a of a person, even beyond your work, right? Maybe you're like at work, you're the boss because this guy's the best Egyptian snake stomach doctor on the planet. But beyond that, like, what do you talk to your wife about, right? Like, I mean, if you're that guy or the woman what do you talk to your husband about? I mean, because you don't anything beyond that, you'd be just lost, right? And I don't think anyone's proposing to lock yourself in a dungeon and only study Egyptian snake stomachs if that's what you decide to specialize in. But I think I'm getting the wrong impression of what the specialization means when people say that, because truly, if you go in deep enough, there's never, like, the rabbit hole doesn't end for a lot of these things. So when someone is emphasizing how important it is to specialize in something and be the Michael Jordan of that one thing, I think they're mistaken in how they're framing that, right? I think they don't realize that you don't have to be the number one best person on the entire planet or one in a million when it comes to the your whatever ability, because odds are you're probably just not that good. Somebody is genetically predisposed to be better at you than this one thing. So why specialize? Why why invest that much just to get beat out because someone is naturally better at it than you? If anything, it behooves you more to be very dynamic and have more ability. Say, all right, fine, you're better at me at this, I'm better than you at that. It's like, okay, boom, checkmate. Versus I, put all my eggs, it's just about putting all your eggs in one basket. And I think people don't, when they talk about careers, they just think it's best to be this irreplaceable person, but Draymond Green is equally as irreplaceable as Michael Jordan in some sense. In terms of the success of the team, I think if you take either one of them off of their respective teams, their teams don't win. So, I mean, if that kind of, I think, sums up my my argument. So, anyway, that's my little rant on being a generalist versus being a specialist. I understand why people say that you should be a specialist in something. Right? It's one thing to have to not be good at anything. I mean, I guess that's kind of if you just suck at everything. Like, I just try to be good at one thing at least. But especially if you can be good at multiple things, you might as well. Like, it's hedging your bets, right? So in the same way you'd buy stocks in a startup that's probably going to flop, you buy some government bonds just to hedge those bets. As an investor, that's what you do. And same with everything. I think you should hedge your bets and have things in place, because you could get replaced, right? I mean, again, what if the snake just goes extinct and you have no more snakes to study and you just waste all that time being an expert, and now you're just a historian about a snake that no one cares about because they're all dead. So, I don't know. I always took exception to people's advice saying, "Oh no, get so unbelievably good at this one tiny little thing, and then your career will be great because you're that guy." It's like, you don't have to. A lot of times, good enough does the job. Like 80% of it does the job. Like, do you need, the number one best, like, cybersecurity expert of all time on your team? Like, even if you don't need them, right? Someone who's just pretty good will do the job. And, unless you're protecting trillions of dollars worth of, intellectual property and assets, somebody who's good enough, again, probably does the job. You don't need the guru. And if you're the guru, maybe you have to convince everyone has to believe that you're the guru. So that's one challenge in and of itself. But then it's a problem of being fairly compensated is another thing. Getting yourself in the right positioning, to get what you're worth as a guru, versus if you're just pretty good at it, you can just be pretty good at it and do everything, other stuff. I don't know. I'm not, I'm not a huge fan of being over specializing, but anyway, I'll move on to something else. Yeah, so let me look at my list. I suppose something else I find interesting, and I'd be curious to think more about where this applies in our everyday lives is the the application of stories and into like stories, or I guess myths are a better word to use, because can get stories can get convoluted in other ways that we use that socially, but myths I think are better suited for this discussion. Myths of things of like the supernatural, legendary beasts, religions, other things that in our that's not to say that every myth isn't like entirely true or entirely false. Like there have been myths about say some murder mystery that was end up being solved. So it's not to say that anything, when I use the word myth, I'm talking about a falsehood, because that's not exactly the case. But the interesting thing about myths is that they tend to provoke more questions than answers, which especially when confronted with science, we seek to answer these questions. So if we talk about the story or the myth or the legend of some religion, people are quick to try to use science to explain their way at such to end the story, right? I think you can boil this down by saying the purpose of explaining something is to stop like the questioning, or to really like halt the conversation, right? Because if there's a myth about the clouds are secretly I don't know they're secretly made of cotton candy, and someone's like, yeah, no, they're not. Here's scientific research that says otherwise. And so there's kind of no more, the myth around clouds being cotton candy doesn't exist anymore. So like no one really questions that. But I really think, and you'd think maybe, I don't know, maybe your impression of me is that I'm just this uber scientist who's going to approach everything with this cold, hard, calculable facts. But I find a lot of wonder in myth, and especially in stories, legends, myths, whatever you want to call them, that provoke more questions than answers. I truly think that abandoning them in the name of science and being scientific is a mistake, even just socially. And this, you could even rope a lot of religious myths, or every other religion, the other person's wrong, whatever. I don't think it really matters. I think the real purpose of them is to be able to ask more questions and to not have answers. So one of my guilty pleasures is like not like these conspiracy theories or anything. And I think that's conspiracy theories even fall into the same category of things that provoke more questions than answers. Like, oh, did Bush really do 9/11? Like, it's a good, and some of these are kind of silly, I think, but not to say he didn't, wink, wink. But I just think, being like sharing myths and sharing stories and having them being a part of society and of culture is a inherently good thing, because it just allows, it's an open door for questions. Everybody's, no questions are stupid even. And I think the moment we try to, over rationalize or explain everything, we lose all the wonder. And I think that's one thing that, I may have mentioned this before, but is why I think a lot of adults just kind of lose interest and passion and just kind of just slog their way through everything, is they just lose their sense of wonder, because we've been able to explain everything. And I think people find solace in myths, in the unknown, and in being able to ask questions that reasonably have even you don't know, like Bigfoot might still be out there. And I think people are like, oh, you silly goose. Or, they wouldn't say that, but, they'd be quick to dismiss. There's no evidence. The research says this. Even the sense that we get to share and speak about myths as something is to me provokes a sense of wonder in people, in the sense that they're like, this would imagine if this were the case, right? Imagine if the clouds were cotton candy, right? It in some ways gives people more reasons to, not reasons to live per se, but reasons to be excited and intrigued about the universe instead of just being overly depressed by its state, because I think when you get overly scientific, you just find yourself in this feedback loop of trying to explain everything. Everything has some logical explanation, even though the logical explanation is, it is, relatively unknown, but it's ultimately the point of explanation. I think I read this in the book, Finite and Infinite Games, but the point of explanation is to stop, conversation, is to end myth, in some way. So the moment that we try to use science to just say, hey, this is wrong, this is right, wrong, right, wrong, right, wrong, right, we kind of begin to lose the sense of wonder that I think is why so many people get out of bed in the morning, whether they realize that or not. So I don't know. I think that we should, not to say like, oh, stop using science. We should just ban science. That's not what I'm talking about. I think it is worth noting the function and utility of certain things, especially as the Redditor type person who's like, well, actually. No one, sure, you might be scientifically more accurate in the sense that you were, quick to debunk a Bigfoot theory about something. But fuck you. Let me dream about, especially if it's not like a harmful conspiracy theory that I'm out here peddling, if it's just a myth, and I guess the way I see this the most is in ghost stories. I do one of my guilty pleasures is kind of reading ghost stories and things of the supernatural, and people are like, well, there's actually no evidence of supernatural. It's probably just a light breeze that you felt. It's like, dude, shut the fuck up. Let me just tell my story where I swear I saw a ghost. And again, the point of it, it's a myth. It's whatever you want to call it. You can say myth, story, whatever. Is to to have a sense of wonder and to, I don't know, ask those questions, and those questions are encouraged. That's crazy. What if it was this? Whatever. And versus again, the Redditor who just kind of ruins it and is like, well, there's no evidence of this. It's like, yeah, there is. Of course, there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence of a lot of stuff, right? But some of it is just kind of belief that we have and accept in certain things, and it's not, evidence. If we start drilling down to try and define a lot of these things, they're all, social concepts that we've just created in ourselves as a society. So it's not like, you're any more right than I am. So anyway, I don't know. I just think it's interesting to discuss and think about the functions of myths or stories in a social context. To me, I see a lot of value in people sharing and talking about myths and having them be a part of our lives. People who are quick to use science to unjustify or to disprove things they're annoying. I mean, so stop doing that. Anyway, next I want to talk about art, and it's what that even means. And I think we have, and I guess I was thinking about this in the sense that there are really two different avenues in which we can view and define art. The first is of its social / economic value, being the ticket price of the artwork, and even if it's not worth any money, the validation that it gets socially as a work of art. And I think I'm of the opinion that true art in its form is not, it should not be beholden to any social rules of any kind. There's in and of itself the you know agnostic value of art is neither good or bad. These are merely whether it's economic or social external tags put on art. So especially since it's such a subjective thing, it's kind of funny that people, well, this piece is worth 10 million. It's a subjective thing, right? I think I forgot what the quote I had before was that about like things being subjective, but art of anything is everyone knows art is subjective, right? Things that mean something to you mean nothing to other people. But it's funny that we tie social and economic value to pieces of art as if that like means anything, right? So, like I said this example to a group of friends, but some guy accidentally pisses on a canvas or something, and some art museum picks it up, and they see in the art piece a brilliant wonder of yellow sunshine or something like that, and the artist is like, dude, I accidentally pissed on the canvas, left it on my bathroom. Like, this is not like. But the ultimate thing is, it's they're both right and they're both wrong in the sense that you're allowed to determine the value of art subjectively to be whatever you want, right? Again, you can say that this is worth $50 million, and if people around you believe that it's worth $50 million, then the social value of that art might be worth $50 million. But you can't conflate that with saying that objectively this is a better piece of art than one that I find is worth $50 million, right? I think that the fact that we have economic value tied to something like art is inherently, in some ways it makes it no longer art and rather just some kind of product. So I think true art, not to say true art is worthless, but the fact that it's kind of paradoxical that we try to assign value to art. And I guess this really depends on how you view art. I mean, if you view it entirely as a economic or social function and not just a free expression of one's, subconscious, or I don't even know how to. I think describing it in as itself is paradoxical. I don't think defining art as something is not trivial. It's a very, very difficult exercise to accurately or even do it justice to defining art. And I think it's just even more stupid that we try to assign this economic value and this is a better artist than such and such, and in a lot of ways that just kind of goes against the whole premise of art. So it's kind of similar to the concept we talked about philosophy being like this, an academic subject of a science. We kind of have this boiled down. All these subjects are boiled down to sciences when, like they're not. The fact that because again, it is quite subjective. Like the meaning is subjective, the value is subjective. So it's not. It doesn't make any sense that we assign so much value to it. So maybe in a world where everyone shares my beliefs, there is no purchasing or even like exchange of art, right? Art is made for art's sake. It's not made for any reason. Even self-expression might be the only justifiable, like only thing you could say it is made for, but in reality it's I guess maybe that's it. It's just self-expression. It exists in a vacuum. There's no there's no motives. There's no, hey, pump out this another piece of artwork so I can sell it, or this guy's a great art. And I think there's another thing in valuing the talents and abilities of something, like especially if somebody is very, very, they're very steady hand and they can draw a perfectly straight line, or they can the detail of some of these pieces of art is immaculate. I think there's a difference between being impressed by the articulate, steady hand skills, so to speak, the hard skills of an artist is separate from the I don't know, his philosophical value or the artistic value, which again, it's kind of defining itself circularly, but the artistic value of something is often different. So I can admire a piece of artwork solely for the fact that it's, whoever painted this is incredibly skilled in the sense that they have the detail. It looks super real. They drew a perfect circle by hand, without using a compass. Like, this is insane. There's interesting the skill of art versus like the artistic value of art, which again could just be piss on a canvas, right? And especially with like modern art and modern art museums, like, you see, these masterpieces. Somebody painted this beautiful ship, and all the details are meticulous and perfect and all like right in place. And then it's right next to, a blank canvas. It was next to a urinal, and it's like, how are these in the same building? And it kind of points to my point that we kind of miss the point of art when we try to, like, we buy and sell it, and we have it in these museums, and we appreciate and shame others, and like, this is good art, this is bad art. Like, in and of itself, we're kind of, that's not how I think of art. I don't think art I don't think art was meant to be that way. And again, there was no beginning of art. I think we were always, in creating things for the sake of just creating and for self-expression, or for, I don't even know. We haven't really grasped the real concept of art in terms of its social function, right? I think we just do it because we're perhaps naturally inclined to do it. More so than other species. It's interesting. You don't see other. I'm not sure. I guess you'd have to call a monkey expert in, get that specialist in here. But, do monkeys just randomly just create pieces of art? And what drove us to do that? Is it boredom? Are other species so concerned with survival that they don't have the time, or is it the intellectual capacity that they're unable to create art? Is that what their bottleneck is? So why are we even bothering to do this? And it's interesting, and I do not think that the origins of that trace back to, it's for economic value. That's not it. We've assigned economic value because we assign economic value to everything. I mean, not to be like, not to get off the rails here, but you can buy organs, on the dark web or in a hospital. You can buy hearts, and you can buy we've assigned value to everything. Everything has economic value. Sometimes it's zero. Sometimes people pay to get rid of it, like trash. But other times, everything has its own value, and art is no exception. There's not much else that has even life in and of itself has a certain value. People will pay money to have people killed. People will, even the military has an entire concept is, you're killing people that are the economic damage of which is this and that. We've numberified everything, so it's not, everything has a value. Not to say it should, and there's a lot of things that probably shouldn't, but that's just how it works. Same with art. I don't think it should be something that has this economic price tag on it, but we do, and I think it kind of goes against the spirit of art. But I think even just individually, I view art as something that doesn't have a economic price tag. Again, and people can make whatever decisions they want on whether or not they decide to adopt that, but that's ultimately the view I take on things, is that it's not, art is made for art's sake, and is thus like, there's no good or bad art. So and again, there's a difference between good and bad, like skill. Again, I would argue that the skill of the paint strokes and the guy who painted the ship, they're objectively better than the guy who accidentally pissed on the canvas. But ultimately, like, the good or badness of that is a subjective measure. And while I would defend the skill of the ship guy who painted the ship much more than the guy who pissed on the canvas, it's ultimately in the eyes of the beholder, true art. So it is not made for any economic value or thing in mind. So I don't know. Because I think about even just this stupid YouTube channel as a form of art. And again, I don't think there's no. You can call it good or bad. I can call it good or bad, but it's ultimately not made for the purpose of this economic value. Ooh, it's going to be this economic value of monetize. It's not. That's not the point of it, right? It kind of it's made for the sake of making it. That's it. There's not. People are very easy to try to squeeze in and try to determine if there's some. Where's the economic value? Where's the money in this? Where's the power? Where's the influence in this? And I think art should be one of those things, or is one of those things in my eyes that it doesn't. It's not. That's not the point. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought or concept of good art and bad art, and I would be on the side to argue that good and bad art is is not a thing. The skill is something. You can make arguments for or against skill sets that artists might have or not have. Again, I think everyone is technically an artist, but the value of the art itself is not, the art, not the skill that made the art. The art is a subjective measure. So I don't know. It's an interesting thought. So I don't know. I don't know if you think I'm not sure if you think is, think there is good or bad art. Maybe you do, but again, don't try to think about it in terms of economic value. Think of it in terms of subjective value. So some people truly see, the sunshine rays through a piss-soaked canvas, but it's a piss-soaked canvas. I peed on a canvas, and that's it. So anyway, another thing that I think is, I guess I already talked about, is world peace possible? Like, is conflict inbuilt to human nature? I watch my own videos sometimes, and that might seem, I don't do it for the sake of like, oh, great video. It's like all these videos are garbage, but I do it to think more about what I say and to see how closely or I guess far away what is in my head and what comes out of my mouth are, which again might not always on the same page. And plus just to kind of think twice sometimes, think a couple times about, what the hell I'm talking about. And I mentioned something about, I think it was like testosterone or something and, being naturally competitive, but it got me thinking about, like the possibility of, especially even with like advanced technology that everyone's like, oh, we're going to go to a utopia because AI will do all this great stuff for us. And people are like, oh no, it'll be dystopia because, it's going to take our jobs and power will be consolidated, which, there's an argument for both of those things, but, I'm not going to talk about that. But is world peace even possible in the sense that is conflict, and maybe not world peace, but is conflict an inbuilt hereditary genetic predisposition for all of us? And there's a strong argument for yes, but I'm curious to see if there's, because also I think in the same way conflict is inbuilt, so is collaboration, so is working together. And we formed our own societies. I don't think conflict in and of itself is always the method in which we use to, I don't know if it's solve problems, but exist or whatever, because we just as quickly have, come together. And in some sense, we've come together more than we have come apart. And a dystopia, utopia question is really, which nth degree direction does that go? Are we more likely to entirely consolidate into one full functioning thing, or are we more likely to diverge into every man for themselves kind of thing? Because you think about it, we've come together. Historically, we created society because we wanted to collaborate. I'll bake bread, you raise the chickens, or whatever. You know what I'm talking. They kind of segmented tasks, and now it's so convoluted. I mean the tasks that people do, and like the way that people are, the way we exchange and sell goods is all through this currency, and it's kind of interesting to think how the progression, how it began. It began as I'll bake twice as much bread, if you make twice as many shoes, and we'll exchange. Bada bing, bada boom. That's fair, whatever. And now there's all this like, you got people that just stare at, electrons on a fucking screen and punch in numbers and are, can buy all the bread in the world, right? whatever. It's just funny to think about that. But anyway, it came together in that sense. But then we also, we've had just a tendency to rip each other's heads off. I mean, war has been a focal point of society once as it's been created, because it's one people against another. And so is that a more powerful force than coming together? I think it's optimistic, or potentially hopeful to say that no, we're more likely to come together than to come apart. And again, I'm not sure if I have an argument for or against either. I mean, I have arguments, I'm sure, but I'm not immediately inclined to go one way over the other, so to speak. I think it's I think the power of conflict at a baseline level. So like the first level, like 0 to 1 in terms of conflict, is more powerful than 0 to 1 coming together. In the sense that it's easier to destroy than it is to create. So working together is much more difficult. Or it's not even more difficult. It's easier to just, one person can ruin it for a million people, but a million people coming together as one is, I mean, I think I wouldn't be alone in saying that is a much more difficult thing. It's not much more unlikely even. But one person can, I can be a hacker and go ruin everyone's day and blow stuff up and do whatever, do a bunch of damage that it would be much more difficult for me to undo all of that through coming together. And so even if you say the argument that I think more people are on the side of working together, do we have the correct ratio of people working for and against, an effort like world peace as an example, or collaboration, whatever you want to call it? Do we have enough people on, both sides of that? What is the ratio? Is conflict 4 times more powerful than collaboration? So if so, do we have 4 times as many good people as bad people? And I mean, again, I'm being so reductive in how I'm talking about this, in the sense that there's good and bad people. That's ridiculous in its own right. But even if we just want to think about, again, it's an interesting question. I mean, I do think that conflict is more powerful inherently than collaboration, but is it? And I also would say that there are more people that are inclined to collaborate than to destroy stuff, But in what ratio do they exist, and in what ratio will they converge to? Because ultimately, a dystopia and utopia it's really just the convergence of those things. In the sense that we're either going to converge to absolute destruction, in the sense that power is so consolidated, or destruction is so consolidated, and that one person can ruin it for billions, or our collective efforts are powerful enough to thwart even the strongest attempts at destruction or something like that, because collaboration is that strong. So I don't know. That's really where I see the utopia and dystopia like directions, is the convergence of collaboration versus destruction. And again, I'm kind of using shitty words for this, but I'm not sure if I can come up with any better ones. I mean, I can, but not right now, obviously, because I would have used them. But anyway, it's still an interesting idea, especially if we're all doom and gloom about a dystopia versus utopia. Because I think the advanced technology will allow people to become more destructive, and yeah, obviously they're becoming more powerful, and collaborative too. But again, what is that ratio? And does the advances on we'll even take a specific example. We'll say cybersecurity, right? So you have like black hats and white hats, or red hats and blue hats. And really what that means is like the red hat tries to break stuff, the blue hat tries to fix stuff. And as always, it's always been really in that industry, the blue hats are always like one step behind the red hats. So the red hats find an exploit, and blue hats are like, all right, we'll fix it, kind of thing. As in, the hackers kind of always have the upper hand. And if that ratio kind of rings true at, again, the like global scale, in terms of like the enemy always has the upper hand, or the bad actors always have the upper hand, then that would point more towards a dystopian future, because that would be the nth degree in which we converge towards dystopia. But I don't know. Again, we have a tendency to romanticize, in these Marvel movies about all the heroes getting together and doing all the hero stuff, and yippee. And it's great, and I think that people love those, and for good reason. But how accurate, or how accurate is that? And I think it's much more easy to be cynical, just as it's much more easier to destroy than it is to create. So it's easy for me to say, oh, we're all screwed. But I don't want to be so conclusive in saying that, I'm certain that we're going to converge on dystopia versus utopia. But if we're going to, if I use the example of cybersecurity and the black hats and blue hats, or the red hats and blue hats, black hats and white hats are also, they mean different things, but if you're not into it, you don't really know. The red hats they do have the upper hand, because you have to find what's broken before you can fix it. And I don't know, does that apply in this this macro sense? It's fair to say no, and I think that that's where you could begin an argument for now utopia is more likely. But again, there's arguments to be made both ways, so it's a very interesting framework to think about it, I think, and it's one that can certainly think about for longer as well. But anyway, I'll probably just wrap it up here. I think we had plenty of good discussion today, so thanks for watching. I will see you next time. Peace.